Mark, like, what is a stress-related illness?
So, a stress-related illness is uh, a mind-body pattern that emerges out of how we live. So you develop symptoms, but the symptoms come from not because you were born with certain genes that predispose you to this. The symptoms arise and become chronic until you sort of get a diagnosis, right? Uh, because of ways in which we live that activate our fight or flight or freeze nervous system. We all have that from our primitive past to keep us safe and out of harm's way. But that part of our biology is getting triggered a lot just in everyday circumstances. How we work, the lack of sleep, that we don't live in community like we used to. And so our family pressures are greater. It's hard to parent, in single family households when we used to live in communities with each other. And so because of these stressful ways of living, and perhaps because you've had trauma in your life, your mind-body network gets sensitized. And when I say sensitized, I mean your nervous system becomes a little overactive. And that overactivity changes your brain, turns genes on and off, changes your biochemistry. And so as a result of all that stress over time, symptoms like heart arrhythmias, heart disease, obesity, dysfunctional ways of eating, habits around eating that make things worse, habits of consuming all kinds of things that make things worse. So addictions of all kinds, depression. People think, it was really popular in the 80s and 90s when the whole genome was getting explored. Like scientists and researchers thought that the gene was going to explain everything. And what we're discovering is there isn't a gene for depression. Depression, more often than not, emerges out of the way we live and where our attention goes and how we stew on stories. And all of that is changing our biochemistry and shifting us. And there is a brain involved. And so brain does change, genes do turn on and off. And then you get this condition that won't go away. So what I'm not trying to say is thinking creates these things. What I'm trying to say is they're complex patterns that emerge out of the full milieu of your life, living in ways that do not amplify and optimize beauty, truth, and goodness. And those qualities of life, when we feel the goodness and the care of other people, when we feel safe, when we are in circumstances that speak to the core artist that lives in us, that loves to see and smell and taste and hear amplified beauty in all of its forms. That aspect of us that is resonating towards what is right and what is wrong, that can feel settled when we connect and connect with the truth and become enlivened by, I want to say spotless or faultless, but it's sort of closer to when things, the way you think, the way your circumstances are oriented is reasonable. And that reasonableness resonates, and it just, and all of these, this beauty, truth, and goodness, they all blend and merge with each other, and we're not getting enough of that goodness that you get when you feel the warm connection with another person, the beauty of, or just even having the time to connect with enough to satisfy your inner artist. And when social situations, political environments don't amplify the truth, but the opposite, it's unnerving. It doesn't feel good. And this lack of well-being, that has a real, if we can agree that what really matters is what matters to conscious human beings, and that conscious human beings prefer more beauty, truth, and goodness, then there's actually a right and a wrong way. And so it has sort of a moral flavor. It's actually more right to move towards beauty, truth, and goodness and away from the opposites. And so, so if you want to feel good and lower your symptoms, what you have to do is begin to amplify the beauty, truth, and goodness in your life. And that is a practice. It's a practice of attuning to yourself with acceptance and care and a wish for the highest good, others sensing into them with acceptance and care, wish for the highest good, situations the same way. And that motivation is this moral motivation to improve things, wanting things to be better. And again, what is better is more beauty, truth, and goodness. So I know this is a long answer to what is a stress illness, and I'm actually answering it with the remedy. So it's less about curing yourself with medicine, because it's really hard to cure depression with medicine. You can lower the intensity of symptoms, but if you continue to amplify the opposite of beauty, truth, and goodness in your life, the depression has everything it needs to keep going. And so does the anxiety, and so does the heart disease, and so does the irritable bowel syndrome and the autoimmune diseases, all these things that come out of, again, that whole milieu of living in ways that don't feel good. So what we want to do here at Skillfully Aware, and the movie that we're trying to start a conversation and really amplify this message, help having people really understand that the source of wellness, that the remedy of your symptoms is simpler than you think, and it's going to come out of the way you live. It's going to change when you learn how to change your thinking, your speaking, and your acting. So again, that morality so the morality is living virtuously, but for the reason that you want to connect with others with more goodness, and yourself, and improve situations, not just, in your family, but also in your local community and larger. As much of this amplification as we can enact, that's going to have a huge effect on how we live and how we feel, and the symptoms that arise out of this dysfunctional way of living are going to start to moderate and go away.
Totally. Okay. That's great. No, you're kind of talking about how to get out of it. And
can I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to leave you with the impression I'm down on medicine. Because if you do have symptoms, heart arrhythmia or irritable bowel or Crohn's disease or whatever, and the depression, and the medicine helps you manage and therefore move towards amplifying beauty, truth, and goodness, take the medicine. Use the medicine for what it's good for, which is to lower the intensity of symptoms. Okay, not for the cure. The cure is in the beauty, truth, and goodness, which sounds so strange, but that's where it's going to come from. Well-being is going to come from living well. All right?
I like that.
Okay.
Well-being is going to come from living well. Yeah. So if you're using, whatever you're doing, as long as you're focusing it towards the beauty, truth, and goodness, you will lessen the stress in your life.
And the reason being is your nervous system is going to be all along for the ride, right? I mean, if you're living more connected and in more wholesome relationships that serve you and others, and you're feeling safe, your biochemistry is going to change. Your heart rate is going to lower, and so will your blood pressure, and you may start digesting better and sleeping better, and all of these things begin to add up, and that's that. All of that positive, you can think of it's feedback. All of that positive feedback going through the ecosystem of your life is where the healing is going to come from.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. So I have a few more questions, common questions, and a couple that I just thought of, but I want to break two real quick to thank everyone who's here. Thank you. And remind everyone, if you'd like to share this on your timeline, you can do so on the top right of your screen. Share it with a friend, invite a friend you think would benefit. Like it if you see something you like, love it if you see something you love. And ask questions. We're here to answer your questions. Yeah,
please. I really want to engage with some of you, and I'm under the assumption that, is that a question right there?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So I'm under the assumption that if you're watching this, thanks for the like, that if you're watching this, that you may have some symptoms in your life that you want some answers around, and I'd love to be able to give you some specific tools to be able to begin amplifying the beauty, truth, and goodness.
So kind of along those lines, so this talk is called, do I have a stress-related condition?
Yeah.
So can I ask you that? Can you diagnose, not necessarily me personally, or like a person, like how does someone know if they have a stress-related condition? Or is every condition a stress-related condition?
More and more scientists are finding out, and do an internet search, and you'll find that approximately, and the statistics vary, but from 70 to 90% or so, scientists believe that the reason a person goes to the doctor is because they have an illness related to stress. And a lot of my colleagues feel like it's on the high end of that, and maybe even higher, that most of the reason why symptoms arise is a stress-related condition, and only very few, 5% or so of conditions, are actually based on pure physiology, pure genetics. Usually there's some combination of living a certain way for a prolonged period of time that is a stressor to your system, that changes the biochemistry, turns genes on and off, that then begins to produce symptoms that worsen over time. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think so. Yeah. And so, reminder, anyone just right there in the comment box, feel free to shoot a question, or even a topic or something. Hey, maybe it's not a question, maybe it's could you kind of explore this a little bit, or it doesn't have to, it can be personal, it doesn't have to be personal, it can be for a friend. Anything you wish, please feel free. So a question I had kind of as we were going, you mentioned the film a little bit. Could you explain stress-related illness through the perception of the films? Is your story making you sick? So through my story.
Okay.
So how is my story causing or not causing stress-related illness?
Stress-related illnesses, don't think of one cause, okay? Because it's way more complicated than that. It's, like I said, it's a milieu of, meaning a mix of how you live, what are your genetics, who you live with, what you eat, how much you sleep, right? There is not just one cause. But the thing that is common with every single human being, everybody grows up and has language, and language lives inside of us, and every single one of us narrates our life in our own head, and we develop habits. That narrator develops perspectives and habits that cause the story that's being narrated to be tinged with certain themes. And so people can develop, let's say a person has a tough childhood and they're living through some difficulty, and so the narrator in their head views things not objectively but tinged negatively, and so pessimistically, and let's say there's a theme of loss that's become a habit, a theme of threat that has become a habit. Well, the themes of your story then will determine what emotions you feel. If you live with the theme of loss cycling in your head, you are going to feel sad. That is the emotion that will emerge out of that narrative. Mm-hmm. And if that gets amplified and stays too long, again, your brain will change, genes will turn on and off, the chemistry will create a balance that locks you into, I don't want to say lock because that's too strong of a word, but makes a solid habit of you being depressed. Mm-hmm. And people develop anxiety because for too long there's been too much ruminating with a story of threat, whatever that threat is, and that if that lives in your nervous system for too long, that story can make you sick, and you can develop all kinds of anxiety related patterns. One that happened in me was when I went through a particularly stressful time in my life, I had difficulty sleeping, and it's because I was thinking too much before I went to bed. But what I noticed while I was thinking is in the background, I'm kind of being a little irritated that I can't get to sleep. Mm-hmm. And I'm tired, and yet I'm not sleeping. And so the next day I wake up and my day is, oh, wow, this is tough. My brain hurts. I hope I sleep tonight. And then I get in bed, more thinking. And then all of a sudden there's a little, I hope I sleep tonight. And then it starts ruminating on, God, I'm not sleeping. Oh my gosh. And that's how it begins to snowball. All stress-related illnesses happen in one way or another in this sort of way, where they start off incrementally, little symptom mixed with not so good of a perception and a story, and that's the amplification. So when I say amplify, the story is the amplifier. And how you move more towards beauty, truth, and goodness is you have to consciously watch the story that's emerging out of you as a habit and shift that story and create the conditions where goodness is easy to feel. You're connected to truth, your own truth, and it feels good in like your living situation feels honest and true. And there's some beauty in your life too. That all of those things are very healing.
And so what are some ways, I'm picturing ways to do that, like physically in life, have a nice clean space,
Yes.
Like in my time, like give myself time before bed, read, or, I can picture those things. How can I create that space?
Starting a meditation practice.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe because I was going to say, how do you create that space inside?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that's
also,
really what
to match that. Yeah.
That's really what meditation, at least how I'm teaching it to my students. I know that meditation can evolve over time if you become a very skilled meditator to become sort of a transcendent activity that grows your consciousness up. But in the beginning, you use it therapeutically so you can feel better. And you sit and you develop this capacity to watch the activity that's happening inside of you with some acceptance and care and a wish for the highest good. That's sort of meditation as attunement. And you learn over time how to put a saddle on the horse of your attention. You learn to settle that down. Your mind can clear. And just by practicing that, you can have a way of doing therapy on yourself that every day you're dipping your toe into that more beauty, truth, and goodness. And so that's a way that you, and another way to say it is you learn to become your own therapist in that regard. So,
Okay, great. So, again, just want to remind anyone, if you have a question, feel free to write it in the comments, and feel free to share this. So I did this quick search on, what is a stress-related illness, and I was super surprised by what came up. Like heart disease was like the number one stress-related illness. Like what I'm gathering from thinking about it and hearing you talk about this is that it's kind of a series of steps where like, is heart disease a stress-related illness potentially because of what it did to my diet or what it did to my body? Like, how do I get from stress to heart disease, or how do I not?
There's a more direct route. So when we talk about the brain, people think it's behind your forehead, but actually we have three brains. Our brain is our brain, our heart is a brain, and our gut is actually a brain. There are actually more neurons in your gut than there are in your head, which is really hard to believe. And all of these three brains are connected through the vagal nerve. And when our mind is chaotic and we're seeing and hearing and feeling stress, our heart is immediately picking up on that cacophony of reactivity. And it's learning to beat harder and stronger, and our gut is shifting the way it digests, and that also changes because it's all learning. This whole thing it's like a recording device, and how you use it, you will imprint how it works based on how you use it and the circumstances in which you were involved. And so your question was, how does
No, you're getting there. I was like, how do I get from, feeling stressed out to heart disease? And you're kind of telling me how, and I was like, well, maybe it's because I'm,
so it's a system
my diet's
thing.
Getting worse, or my living situation is getting worse.
It's a system thing. And this is an open system. It's open to the outside and to the inside. So my heart is connected to my brain and my gut and everything else. And all of those biochemicals, all that. So the heart's an electromagnetic oscillator. It communicates through electromagnetic waves instantaneously to the whole body. And then the body communicates with itself through the messages of chemicals. And the chemicals change based on the appraisal of the person. And what an appraisal is my gut level judgment about this situation. Is it safe? Is it not safe? And so when you are in an environment, the appraisal happens pre-verbally. Your body is already appraising before you're thinking, and the gut can tighten before there's even a thought in the mind. Your pupils can dilate. Your heart can beat harder. All of those things happen instantaneously, and it happens as a result of the meaning, the context of the situation that you find yourself in. And if you find yourself in habitual context, what I want to say, repetitious contexts all the time that are stressful, you're changing your mind-body network and its chemistry and how it reacts. And that's how you develop a stress-related illness. It's like I said, infinite causes. It's a milieu of things. And that's why they're hard to cure, because taking this pill isn't going to change what's going on around you. What you have to do is you have to recognize the causes, like what's stopping me from feeling better, this person, that situation, and slowly you work to improve the things on the list. That you make this list. What's stopping the change? You make the list and slowly start ticking all those things off the list, but at the same time proactively amplifying the beauty, truth, and goodness, which is going to cause your nervous system to settle and feel better. And the feel-good chemicals have the opposite effect. Instead of tearing your body down, the rest and digest, it's all the growth starts to happen from oxytocin and serotonin and dopamine and endorphins. We have the good feel-good chemicals too. It's just that you need to understand how to produce them. And so I'm telling you now how to produce them. More beauty, truth, and goodness. That's how. And you can develop, that's what we teach in Skillfully Aware. You can develop practices that amplify that and lower the volume on the stress.
Yeah, well, you just answered my last question. I was going to say, what can I do now? But I think you kind of said that, where, amplify the beauty, truth, and goodness, start looking at your life and seeing what's causing the stress.
Yeah.
Is probably the best place to start.
That's an analytical meditation that you could do. Okay. So if you want to take a practice away from this talk, sit down tonight or whenever, after you see this video, and get a piece of paper and just sit quietly, turn everything off, and be with yourself and think about the problem that's really got its hook in you. And then just ask yourself, what's stopping the change? And you don't have to search really hard. Let it come to you. Just open yourself. What's stopping the change? What's stopping the change? And pretty soon your nervous system is gonna give you images and a dialogue perhaps. And so your nervous system is gonna tell you what changes probably are that you should prioritize in your effort to amplify the beauty, truth, and goodness. So that, if I want to leave you with anything, that practice will help. Analytical meditation, just thinking about what's stopping the change, and then get the list and check in with yourself. You may not like what's on the list. You may not want to give something up. And if you're not ready, you're not ready. But just so you know that the symptoms are likely going to last until you move past this thing.